Welcome, fans of the Justice League universe. My name is Sam.
My name is Nick.
And we are two members of the JLU Podcast team who enjoy analyzing the DC films from Warner Brothers Studios. You can follow me at OttenSam on Twitter.
You can follow me at JLU Podin. And you can follow the show at JLU Podcast.
In this episode, we're going to talk about scenes 19 and 20 of Justice League. And both of these scenes feature Arthur Curry. This is going to be where we see him going into the water a little bit and having a little bit of a tussle with Steppenwolf. So far, we've only seen him briefly when Bruce Wayne was meeting him up in Iceland. And, of course, we saw a little bit of him in BVS with this footage that's from a submersible. And in that BVS clip, we saw a little bit of his, swimming powers and the fact that he could withstand a lot of pressure. But in this movie, we haven't seen his powers really in any way yet. So this will be the first time where we get to see Arthur let loose a little bit and have his first fight that he has to get involved in. So scene 19 will be him rescuing the sailor, dropping him off at the bar. And then scene 20 will be him going to Atlantis and having a little fight with Steppenwolf around the mother box. And also, just to let people know, Nick and I are going to be talking through a little bit of a new format here. Instead of talking through all the details of the scene and breaking down dialogue and themes and everything, we're really going to just bring up kind of 3 points that we want to make about each of the scenes, and we'll talk about those points and kind of just go with that. So does that sound all right, Nick?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so let's go into scene 19. So we have this guy out at sea, and he's in a little bit of trouble, and the point that we want to make here is just that his ship is actually called the Cortlandt, which is a special name, one that's meaningful to Zack Snyder particularly. So you might know Cortlandt as a city in New York, but I don't think that that's what that's referring to here in the movie, because Cortlandt is also the name of a housing project that takes a central role in Ayn Rand's novel The Fountainhead. A little backstory about that. That novel is about an architect named Rourke, and he's a non-conventional kind of avant-garde sort of architect who has his own creative ideas about what he wants to do. And he has this housing project that he's designing, but his design that he came up with was not actually followed. He had this idea and he had this vision for how he wanted it to be, but during the construction, Rourke's vision was compromised and changed to instead go with kind of a more conventional approach. And so the drama kind of comes from him reacting to his vision being trampled on and that sort of thing. And actually, spoiler alert for The Fountainhead, but Rourke destroys the housing project itself because he is so enraged that they changed his vision. So I'll just stop there and let you respond to some ideas that come to your mind from that description about Cortlandt.
That kind of rules. That kind of makes me want to read The Fountainhead. I don't know. Another interesting fact about the name Cortlandt, and this is directly related to filmmaking, Cortlandt is the name of an alley in New York City. It's one of 3 alleys in Manhattan. I visited there last year, and I didn't realize this until somebody pointed it out. There's no alleys in New York City. You have this vision in your head if you've never been there and you've only seen it in movies. And there must be alleys everywhere. Everybody's always getting mugged in alleys in New York City. Literally 3 alleys. One of them is Cortlandt. And the Cortlandt alleyway is basically every movie scene that you've ever seen where they shot, a scene in an alley was shot in the Cortlandt alley. But there's so many levels that's working on. Sometimes Zack Snyder reminds me a lot of Stanley Kubrick, and this is one of those times with that detail.
Yeah.
Another thing is a lot of people are going to hear this and start correctly getting mad that we're talking about Ayn Rand, but I mean, can't get too hung up on that kind of thing. I'm about as far left as it gets. If you follow me at JLU Podin on Twitter, honestly, at least half of my tweets, no, more than half of my tweets, political stuff, I'm not really an Ayn Rand fan.
Yeah, me neither.
The philosophy makes sense for the story. I can see it in the story. It's pretty clear. Especially Batman here is a very Randian figure. You gotta take what you can get and appreciate different points of view. I don't think Zack Snyder's a fascist, so let's not go that far. But
yeah, I
can definitely appreciate this thing about wanting to destroy the housing project rather than let them ruin it. I absolutely get that. So yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah, and for me, there's kind of this separation that I can do. I can take Ayn Rand's philosophy and selfish kind of perspectives, and I can put those aside and be I just don't agree with that at all. And I can also say okay, she was racist in a lot of ways, and on the record is quite racist. But I can also sort of say all right, But let's just think about a story about somebody's creative vision getting corrupted, and then how does the artist react to that? You know, like a story of making art and the artist's relationship to art, that sort of thing. And that there are artistic people in society who do have visions, and then what does that vision mean to them? To me, that's a worthwhile story that can be told.
Yes.
If you can kind of separate it from other Randian stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And speaking of racism, dude, every philosopher you've ever read was like a huge racist. This is just what people in the past were like, so I don't know.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to just mention this for this scene is because it ends up being quite ironic or metatextual kind of that Zack Snyder had this vision for Justice League, and so he's like the Rourke character, and then these other forces come in and say, no, we need it to be more conventional, we're going to change your vision. So it's like almost just crazy ironic how that worked out. But I think that's probably all we need to say about that, because we want to... Yeah.
One more point.
Sure.
If you're listening to this and you're like, why are they focusing on this so much? What an odd detail. If you've seen that Zack Snyder shirt that has like the weird design of like the plot is like it's a cryptogram or something for like the planned plot for this series.
Yeah.
Cortlandt is just literally written on there.
Yeah.
Right there in the middle in huge text. So this is something Zack Snyder spends a lot of time thinking about. So
yeah.
Maybe we should too if we want to understand this movie. Moving on.
Yeah. So moving on to our next point from the scene, it's the reference to the monsters from above, and then Arthur seeing this green goo that kind of got onto his hands. Here, not so subtle, not so deep of a layering or a little Easter egg. This, I think, was basically trying to make it very clear that the audience needs to remember that there's an alien threat coming, and that this thing in the water is now aliens have arrived, in the water, or they're in the area, that sort of thing. So to me, it's kind of this just directly reminder to the audience, and I chalked this up to sort of like some of the straightforward plotting of Justice League. Like earlier with Arthur Curry, let's literally draw it on the wall that there's a box, and that, oh, what's this box about? And then here, like, let's literally have alien goo so that we remember there's aliens threatening to come.
Yeah, it's kind of like Joss didn't quite get the lesson of show don't tell. Because from what we understand, the original version of this scene was longer, and it actually showed him arriving at the boat. The parademons were there. That's how he knew about the parademons. He has to fight a couple, and then he rescues the guy. And then, you just cut all that out, so you can get that 2 hours, 0 minutes, and 1 second runtime. So important. That's exactly what they're doing with Endgame, and that's how you know it's going to be good, because Endgame is going to be exactly 2 hours. Okay, I'll stop. Yeah, it's kind of a frustrating scene. In fact, I don't actually have that many notes about it. I like chugging a bunch of whiskey, like a lot of whiskey before swimming off to loosen up a little bit. But
yeah, and that's really our last thing for the scene is his kind of exit. So the Icky Thump pumps in from White Stripes, and yeah, he's down in the whiskey. So for me, I don't mind the music here. I feel like the energy of the music kind of fits the character. So this is one case where that, licensed music to me was okay. But I did think it was a little bit weird, the way he was handling himself as he was exiting, because he kind of just saw this goo and he heard this guy talking about monsters from the sky. But from what we saw here, like, Arthur doesn't really know what he's talking about, and yet this green goo seems kind of weird. And then he just chugs and, like, walks in the water. Like, to me, there's a little bit of a lack of flow from, like, the information that he just found out to then where he's, like, how he's walking out and how he's exiting the scene.
to me, that kind of checks out, because Arthur really is kind of a put upon guy where he's just sort of like, oh, God, all right, I'll go figure out what this freaking goo is.
Yeah, that's true.
What bothers me about the pacing of this scene is just like throwing that song in there and doing all that after the last scene, which was really like, you know, building the themes of the movie and kind of somber and serious, and you kind of feel bad for Cyborg, and then we like boom, 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 bam, bam, and then back to another like I will find the mother box. Yeah, it's just weird. Yeah. I don't know, man.
Yeah, I think that's right. The other thing for me that was disappointing when I saw this in theaters was, to me, this was a real step down in quality of the shot when he's going into the water. Because there was a trailer where we see Arthur like out on the dock or whatever it is, and it's centered straight behind him, and then the waves crash over him like symmetrically around the sides. And then in the film, that shot is replaced with a shot that's like off to the side slightly, and there's a sign in the foreground, so we don't really take in his great like silhouette and stuff as much. So to me, that was a big step down.
Yeah, the Snyder Cut trailer, which is what I call it now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much more power when you're straight on too. Like visually, it's a much stronger shot if you're centered and the waves crash, from the sides.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. Yeah, that's a better shot.
And speaking of Kubrick, like Kubrick would have had it centered. Like Kubrick very much used the center line a lot.
I love that Kubrick, man.
So let's go ahead and move into scene 20. So this is Aquaman going down, or Arthur Curry, I guess at this point, going down into the water to basically, we can infer he's checking out what the goo is all about. And he has, this ability to swim, so he figures he'll go and see what he can see. The first point we want to make on this one is we get a little bit of Atlantis. We don't see the city of Atlantis. We don't see the whole culture, that sort of thing. But we do see some Atlanteans. We see some armor. We see Mera, and we see them, around the mother box. So to me, it's kind of nice, actually. We get these little glimpses of Atlantean objects and people, but we save the actual Atlantis for James Wan, which I think is actually the right call. Like, leave almost all of it for James Wan.
If you're using the term Atlantean as like kind of a catch-all for underwater civilization, I don't think they're actually in Atlantis. This only just hit me watching the scene to prep for this episode. But, after having watched Aquaman and come back to this, they literally might not be in Atlantis. For one, like, he doesn't have to go through all the security and stuff, which,
no.
It's pretty clear it's never been to Atlantis. But more importantly, if Mera is the one watching it, maybe it's in her father's kingdom.
Oh, Xebel's, yeah.
Yeah.
You're right, yeah. So it's definitely not the city of Atlantis or anything, but yeah, I was kind of just meaning the broader sense of Atlantis as in like all of the underwater stuff. And yeah, I think they're off on some kind of obscure location, but they have the soldiers that are on guard, and Mera is there kind of checking it out too.
It kind of hit me. I was like, oh, they might not actually be, which would make sense. Like, why would you store a nuclear bomb in Washington, D.C.? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. In terms of, we don't know exactly which soldiers these might be that are here, but we do see the armor. I mean, one thing that's similar about the armor is that the armor is inspired by fins and kind of, water sort of creatures. So that's kind of nice. But here the colors are much more toned down, and it's a little bit darker underwater, where James Wan brings a lot of the like luminescence and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's an inconsistency or anything. I think we're just looking at a totally different part than what we see in the Aquaman movie.
One thing Aquaman does in the movie itself is it kind of gets, the deeper you get into the movie, the more vibrant those colors become. Mm-hmm. So if this is a prelude to the movie, it works within that scheme. If this is kind of muted and then it leads into Aquaman, where things go from being kind of muted to being more magical and as you say, vibrant. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure, that works. Whatever.
Yeah. The next thing we wanted to say here was just to give a little attention to Mera herself, and she gets the first little bit of throwdown with Steppenwolf. And to me, I like it. It's not long, they kept it pretty tight, but I like that Mera goes toe to toe with him, takes some hits from him, and I really liked her move where she just removes the water and Steppenwolf like falls down. I thought that's a very classic and like unique kind of Mera move.
Yeah, that's a great move.
And she ends up using it later in the Aquaman film too. She uses that against Orm when she saves Arthur. So it's something that she strategically deploys when she needs it.
She is smart. Yeah, I guess she's in charge of defending the mother box. You kind of think about it like, where's Orm? Mm-hmm. Yes, that says a lot that she's the one that's on guard there. And it's kind of cool. Well, the thing I like about this scene is it's another demonstration of how powerful Atlanteans must be. You mentioned earlier the scene in Batman versus Superman. My favorite thing about that scene was that you can see on the display of the submersible where they are, the Tonga Trench, and how far down they are, like 26,000 feet. That means that like he's experiencing, I think, a few tons of pressure per square inch. Mm. In order to physically withstand that, wow, you could actually take a punch from Superman if you were that strong. So it's cool to like watch even Mera like getting just thrown into a rock and it like makes a crater. That's pretty impressive, man. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I think that is good. And it's nice to have her starting off the fight and then Arthur come in to help out. And neither one of them is really a match for Steppenwolf. Like even underwater, where you think Mera or Arthur might have the upper hand. Steppenwolf just, does fine. And Steppenwolf doesn't really have to defeat them. He just has to get his hands on the mother box long enough that he can exit. So, Steppenwolf is able to do that pretty quickly. And the last thing we wanted to talk about in the scene is now Arthur coming in and him having his fight with Steppenwolf. And now this is the first time that we're really seeing some of Arthur's powers and way that he maneuvers in the water and that sort of thing. We saw him save the guy on the ship before, but it was a cool entrance and stuff, but it wasn't really a lot of physicality. And here now we get to see Arthur, doing some spins, swimming towards the Atlanteans or the Xebels, and then him having, some of the taken blows from Steppenwolf, that sort of thing. So what was your reaction here to, the first time that we're seeing Arthur kind of in, hand-to-hand combat?
It's fun. It's like that scene in episode 1 where Darth Maul attacks Qui-Gon and there's like a really quick fight and they're surrounded by dust, so you can't really see what's going on. You just kind of get a taste of it. Yeah, it's a good scene like that. Just kind of get a feel for how Aquaman fights. I love him kneeing him in the face. That was awesome.
Yeah, and using the horns on the helmet to pull his head down into the knee. Yeah. I thought that was good use of the costume design that we have for Steppenwolf. I also like that Steppenwolf, he uses his axe in a couple different ways, and he also does his headbutt thing. So like from the Themyscira fight to this one, we can kind of see like Steppenwolf has some go-to moves. He's going to try to headbutt you like a ram kind of, and he's got his axe as his, obviously, his main weapon.
And another thing about him is he doesn't mess around. He is not one of these villains who's like, he just needs that mother box. That's it. That's all he needs. Gets it, goes. I can appreciate about a guy.
Another thing that I was kind of impressed rewatching this scene is that the choreography of the fight is actually pretty good, and the impacts like of the knee and the punches and the hits, they actually have a good, strong physical feel to them. Sometimes I'll watch action movies or superhero movies, and some of the hits just don't really come across very well. Zack Snyder usually does a really good job of feeling the fights and feeling the impact, and here I was impressed that even underwater, when their arms and stuff are moving through the water, they still did a good job of really, feeling the physicality of it.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so that's our quick run-through of those scenes. Next up, we're going to be continuing on in Justice League with a little bit more dialogue, a little bit more substance to dig into. That's Arthur and Mera having their conversation. And we're also going to be continuing analysis on the Aquaman side of things in the film Aquaman. And also keep your ears out for our Shazam review. We are doing our analysis, and we do our review kind of thing where we go a little bit more in depth into character arcs and themes. So we're putting that together right now and should have that up within a few days. So if you're looking for some Shazam content, we're going to at least have that overarching kind of analysis that we'll have for you. And we want to especially thank our patrons. We appreciate the support of the podcast. And actually, if you've been looking for some more of our stuff over the last couple months, most of our activity has actually been over on our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/JLU Podcast. We are going through Man of Steel. So, Nick, have you been enjoying being part of the team there as we're starting to dig into Man of Steel?
It's nice to be able to do this for like a Zack Snyder movie again. Which said, not really realizing I was making a joke, but yeah, totally.
We're 5 episodes in on Man of Steel, and we're going strong on that. So that's happening over on patreon.com/JLU Podcast. We also have a bunch of bonus episodes that have come up over the last couple months. We reviewed a couple animated movies. We've been talking about some of the DC Universe shows, and Rebecca had a nice discussion forum that they were talking about Aquaman from a conference panel. So that's up there as well on Patreon. So definitely check us out over there. And if you are willing to support the show, you can get access to all of that good content. And the Man of Steel stuff, I think, is the thing that our team is most excited about. So that's over there as well. But thanks, everybody, for listening to this as well. And we will have more coming on this public feed, too.